Welcome to This Weekend Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the This Weekend Coworking podcast feed. I am joined by the amazing Wesley Edmonds. Wesley, how are you?
I am doing great, Hector. Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolute pleasure. For folks who may not have heard from you or about you before, tell us a little bit more about what is it that you do in and around coworking, Wesley.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I am the Director of Workplace with OFS. We are a contract furniture manufacturer, and we specialize in basically everything outside of residential. So we're going to be your contract grade furniture for education spaces, healthcare. We do a ton of workplace. We do a lot in the government sector. Like I said, everything outside of residential. So hospitality, all of that. And as the Director of Workplace, I have the pleasure of getting to work with end users and talking through what does the future of work look like, if that isn't the most hot button topic these days, right? But try to figure out where we fall into that category, how we can help with those questions, and then also what's coming down the pipeline. What does that look like? So that is my role with OFS.
That's amazing. And so tell me, Wesley, you didn't wake up one day as a girl and say, I want to grow up to be a workspace futurist helper in OFS. What was your co-working journey? Like, what have you been up to before you came to OFS?
Yeah, totally. You're right. That was not in my journals as a middle school girl. But that would be great if it was, but it wasn't. I had this passion for architecture, actually, from a little kid. Houses were so cool. Always thought I would end up being a architect. Started to look into architecture school. I also was simultaneously in love with the University of Georgia, and UGA does not have a architecture program, but they do have an accredited interior design program or interior architecture program. So that kind of blended both things I loved. Went to the University of Georgia to get that interior architecture degree, which through the course of those 4 years lended itself more towards commercial spaces than residential. And I loved that kind of switch from residential to commercial. So started going down that path and graduated in 2009, which for those who don't remember was a really bad time to graduate from college. So I was really lucky to find a job doing interior design work at a commercial firm in Atlanta. That's where I still live. And worked for this firm in Atlanta doing really cool projects. I mean, think about the big names you think of when you think of Atlanta: Coca-Cola, CNN. That was what I got to work on, and it was awesome. But pretty quickly, I realized that I really liked the part of the process where I got to meet with the clients, hear what they wanted the space to look like. We called them envisioning sessions, whatever you want to call them. But I loved that part. And then it was time to go back and use the degree I spent 4 years getting. I really wanted to just go back to another meeting. I think I just want to go back and talk to more clients. We're kind of brainstorming, talking to other people in the industry, realized that's really more often called business development. So left the design firm I was working for, and I ended up working for 2 different furniture dealerships, which for those who are not familiar with the design process, you can really equate the furniture manufacturer and the furniture dealer like you would a car. So you don't go buy a Lexus from a Lexus store. You go buy a Lexus from a Lexus dealer who also carries other manufacturers, and you go and take a look at what you like, and you leave with the model, the make of the car that you like the best. Say furniture dealers represent multiple manufacturers. So that gave me a window into furniture as a specialty. Spent a couple years doing business development for these dealers, and then found OFS in working with them as one of my manufacturers and jumped to the manufacturer side. And it will have been 10 years this fall with OFS. And this co-working side of our journey is relatively new, but I think probably most of your listeners would agree that the more time I spent researching the future of work, how companies are handling hybrid work, the more often the word co-working and flex and adaptable hybrid comes up over and over again. And so it was really a natural fit for us to begin to dive more and more into this category and to learn what these spaces look like and how they operate. And that's how we got here. That's how I got to meet you and how we ended up right here.
What a fascinating journey. I just love, like, everyone I speak to when they're going to university, college, they're like, I have to make the biggest decision for the rest of my life. I have to choose what I'm like. No, almost everybody I know studied one thing and then found, but not really their calling, but what they're great at, whether they specialize in completely different. As I said, I don't think in your journals anywhere it mentioned office manufacturing, furniture, or co-working. But I do like the fact that you keep hearing co-working in your future of work discussions, conversations with clients, that BD kind of role that you sit in. So I love that. Now, OFS has been in our newsletter fairly recently. I think it was just under a year ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, when you made a pretty big move into the topics you've discussed by acquiring Room, who were one of the market leading companies in the kind of phone booth, private meeting space. And I'm saying that fully aware that you are sitting in a Room booth right now, that you can feel that premium finish just from you sitting in there. But tell us a little bit more about that acquisition. What was involved with that? What was the thinking behind it? And what does it all look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for noticing. Refinishes. No, it's awesome. It's so fun that a part of my job is to promote products like the one I'm sitting in and that it actually works and that I love it. And I can be a user and promote it. That's not a difficult thing to promote when it's easy. But yeah, so about a little over a year ago, really about a year and a half ago, OFS was looking, we're a privately held family-owned business, founded in the 1930s, actually, and still owned by the same family, but we've grown rather large. And we have this kind of unique position in the market because we do compete against those large, big-name manufacturers that most people have heard of in the contract furniture space. But we also have a lot of flexibility and this ability to be super nimble because of that privately held, family-owned feeling about us. There aren't very many layers between the very top of the food chain and those of us out in the field selling or those internal working at the factories. It's just a very lateral hierarchy, which is really special and really unique. So as the sales reps were bringing back into leadership, hey, we're starting to see these pods pop up. Hey, we're starting to get requests from our architects and designers that we're working with, our clients that they're wanting ways to do more with less in terms of square footage. This is also the time that we're seeing post-COVID drastic reductions in footprint. We're seeing people sign crazy short leases. All of that is speaking, like heading in the same direction. All these trains are pointing in the same direction. And this opportunity with Room came about. Anybody that's not familiar, Room it is a direct-to-consumer product that had basically two model numbers, a phone booth, and then a slightly larger room, small, as we would put it, that either exists as a focus room, a single-person private office, or a meeting room. And they were really, and still are, at the top of that category of products. So the timing was right. They were really looking for a partner. We were looking to add on to our product portfolio. So at the end of 2023, we finalized that acquisition. And that really is when I stepped into this new role. And it really made sense for me to work with the Room team on this acquisition and getting the OFS sellers comfortable selling a new product, but also the Room sellers comfortable being a part of this. They were really, this is intended 100% as a compliment. The Room team really was a tech that like and fell into furniture. And so our reps were used to selling furniture, sofas, side tables, offices, the parts of an office you're used to. The phone booth was new for us. And for them, they really were speaking direct to consumer, e-com, tech terms. And it just happened to be a product that would categorize itself as furniture. So those two worlds collided. We've spent at least the first 6-9 months just getting everybody used to each other. And the success has been amazing because they introduced us greatly into more of the co-working world. We were starting to look into that. I like to joke that I was a girl at the very back row of any co-working conference that I would get approval to attend, just taking furious notes. Every acronym this industry has,
This is
one of them, I was in the back row just like typing and figuring out how I can start to learn this industry. Room acquisition happened. We popped up in This Weekend Coworking. That's how I got to know you. And it's been so fun to discover more of this industry. And now I think we belong here more than we thought we did. At the very beginning, it was like Room opened the door for us and we'll see where we play. And now I'm learning there's a huge part of this owner operator process. It's down to furniture selection. And so it's just been really fun to learn. And we've introduced each other to different people in different parts of the process. And it's been really great. I think co-working is just one of the coolest things that's happened to the workplace industry in a really long time.
I 100% agree with that. And I'm a little bit biased based on the publication that I put out, but I completely agree. And I've been that person in the back of the room taking those notes. And we do have way too many acronyms and too much terminology. And sometimes that terminology means two different things depending on who said it. I do not envy those notepads that you're writing those notes into. But talking about terminology, you did mention a term that I'm pretty sure a lot of co-working folks maybe haven't heard of, and that is contract furniture manufacturer. What's the difference between a contract manufacturer and anything else in the industry? How would you define that?
I love that you asked that question. That is like straight up right out of, I was just talking about how it's too many acronyms and terms that nobody knows, and I'm doing the same thing. When it comes to furniture, contract typically means that that the furniture itself, so the sofa, the side table, whatever you're looking at, the private office desk, has been required to meet a set of pretty strict standards showing that it will uphold to the use and abuse of daily wear and tear. Something that you would traditionally buy off of Amazon or Wayfair or something like that would probably not fall into the contract category.
Yep.
Part of that could be non-obsolescence. Part of the contract furniture world means that the chair you buy today is still going to be around in 5 years and 10 years, that you're buying something that's a standard product from that manufacturer to continue to manufacture it. It's not going to be labeled as spring 2024 and in spring 2025, you can't get it anymore. Also, the warranty. So the warranty is held traditionally by the dealer. Going back to that dealer conversation, you would actually place, for the most part, orders are going to be placed through a dealer. They're going to hold the warranty for you, which is going to be at least 12 years minimum.
Oh.
And that's if your caster breaks, if the fabric starts to unravel, if the arms on your chair start to wobble. And some of that we know is, think about education. I don't know about you, Hector, but I mean, walking around a university myself, anything's a table, right? Anything's a chair, even a table. Anything is a chair. People will sit on anything, and students will write on things, and they will carve their undying love on anything. And so all of that has been to furniture. Of course, some of that doesn't fall under warranty, but a lot of it does. And we know that the users are going to sit in that chair however they want. It's not the furniture that they bought for their own house. They're going to sit on their knees. They're going to sit on the top of a desk, and contract furniture is made to withhold that. It actually goes through a level of certifications and testing. I know that's so nerdy, but it goes through all of that to make sure that it will hold up. And so the money that you're spending on it is going to be worthwhile, because you should not have to replace that chair until it uglies out, not until you're going to want to get rid of it because it no longer matches your aesthetic before it falls apart. And that's the main difference, is that you're buying it for a long time. You're investing in a nicer item that will hold up for you.
That is really interesting. And you mentioned that it's geeky, so I'm going to dig a little bit more into that. When you say it's like standardized, is there like a centralized body, or is it like with eggs, cage-free, open rooming? Is it like, who defines what those strict parameters are?
Yes, there is a group. It is called BIFMA, BIFMA,
Okay.
and they have all of these accreditations. They hold, we could go super nerdy here, and I won't do that with you today, but it goes to all of the different degrees of depending on what type of furniture it is, on what category it falls in, where that piece of furniture is ending up. There might be different certifications for education versus for government, and all of that falls under this BIFMA kind of jurisdiction. So they do hold the industry certifications, levels, all of that. So it's definitely real. It's a lot of details. You could get really nuanced with it, but yes, it is standardized. I'm held to the same requirements that any of my competitors are, which makes it very apples
Yep.
to apples when you're looking at contract grade items.
So the reason why I asked that is I was trying to figure out if it's more like lead or, as I said, the cage tag debacle that I'm not going to dig into because I don't understand that standardization either. But it's good that it's a kind of accredited body and it's independent. It's not just you rating your furniture however you want to so you can sell more. And it's a term I'd never heard of. So that's why I love having these conversations, is I get to dig into things that we all sit on every day or write on or work with, but you don't actually think about how they got there. What is the difference between this desk and a contract manufacturer's desk? So I appreciate you getting geeky about that with me. But going back to the room acquisition, you did say when at the time of acquisition, they had essentially 2 products. That is no longer the case. A couple of weeks ago, Room generously sponsored one of the newsletters and you introduced this acoustic lounge set. Tell us a little bit more about that and what your role has been in that rollout.
Sure. So this has been really fun to be on the inside of a new product launch. Now, 100% of the credit goes to our product engineers and supply chain and everybody dealing with the details of that. Definitely does not fall on me. But it's been super interesting to see because, so let's step back onto the OFS side.
Yep.
Even though OFS is the parent company, let's say for this conversation outside of the room category, we do a ton of work with workplace entities, end users, again, in that education, government, workplace space. And this idea of kind of an acoustic chair, acoustic lounge piece comes up a lot because they love that idea of the coffee shop mentality where you're working alone together. That idea of I'm having a conversation, I'm getting my own work done. I can hear some mumbles, maybe a couple feet down in the office, or I'm on a call, you're on a call, but we're not interrupting each other. And what a phone booth does is makes it very isolated. I'm in here, I'm talking, anybody out there they can see me, but they cannot hear me at all. So there's not that kind of mumble happening. There is a need for that other space that's acoustic and it helps absorb a little bit of sound, but you're still getting that buzz of the environment. People they flock to places like that. And we have products like that in our line with OFS that we've had for a while and have done very well with that are that exact same thing, whether it's a sofa, single chair that have these acoustic properties. On the other side of Room, we've had these 2 SKUs. And our end users that are coming to us through the direct-to-consumer channel, they're saying, I'd love to have an acoustic lounge. I'd love to have access to something like that. And we were realizing that we were missing kind of a corner of this market. As we continue to grow our product offering on the OFS side and within the room category, we have to think about supporting the dealers that we work with, but also supporting the end users that come to us through room.com.
Yep.
And the acoustic lounge was a way to do both. So we do hold them in both categories. Our dealers have access to this product and they're able to sell it to their end users through their dealership. We also are offering on room.com as a product that you can purchase with a credit card if you want to go that route. So it's a kind of a unique limbo product for us. And we will continue to grow that category actually are you familiar with NeoCon, Hector?
No. Is that a conference around furniture?
Yes. Yes, it is.
I might have to join that one and write furiously in the corner. Looks like that's in my future.
You are welcome to swap places with me. I'll give you all the acronyms. You can take all the names. NeoCon is the interior furnishings conference of the year. So it's happens every year in Chicago. It's where most manufacturers launch their new products. So it's
Mm.
furniture, fabrics, lighting, anything that would fall in an interior build out. We are launching some new products at this kind of NeoCon conference. Without going too deep into that, there's a second conference called Design Days, same
Mhm.
time of year, exact same show. They just have two different names. But OFS will be showing up at Design Days this year, launching more room products, because that's another thing we've been asked for is we went smaller with the acoustic lounge, single person use, up to 4 people, freestanding, you could move it wherever, it's just lounge. We're now expanding bigger. So where we've had these room units that are freestanding and go about 4x8 is about the largest we have right now.
Mhm.
We're going to launch a room medium and a room large, which will hold up to 6 to 8 people, but still doubling down on that freestanding modular construction, sustainable construction, kind of pop up in place. But now we can start to build out suites with these
Yeah.
units that are large enough to have a private office or a conference room or a huddle space, something like that. So we, again, trying to fill needs on both sides of the
Mhm.
fence.
I mean, folks, you heard it here first. If you want to see it in person, get down to Chicago for that and join me in the back of the room writing down acronyms. We'll have a co-working meetup there and be like, what is going on in this world of furniture? But talking about like the world of furniture, like you had a lot of great conversations, but you've also probably seen a lot of things that made you scratch your head. If I had to ask you, what are like the biggest misconceptions or frustrations that you hear from like the workspace or the co-working industry, especially regarding kind of furniture and how to think about furniture? Like, what would you address there?
Yeah, I love that, Hector. I think the number one thing that comes to mind is the misconception that when you put the word contract in front of furniture, that the cost automatically doubles. And I'll be the first to admit that the contract furniture world is confusing as all get out because there is about zero transparency and it's very frustrating. I'm
Mhm.
sure for any owner operator who's gone online and tried to quote some things or tried to build a budget out, if you have, then you well know it's infuriating because the contract furniture world, I do not know why, but we quote everything as list pricing, and you're never, ever going to pay list pricing. So basically, what you're looking at is not real ever. It's not ever accurate. But the confusing part is that you also don't exactly know your discount because it's different with every single manufacturer. Yeah,
Okay.
confusing, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if I could figure out a way to solve that, I don't think we'd have much reason to talk anymore. I think I'd just be in thing. But so I'll just go ahead and lay that out. One common misconception I hear is I went to your website and your conference tables are astronomical. Yes, they do look that way because what you're looking at is list pricing. I
Mhm.
usually tell people, having worked with end users for 15 plus years now, that you can generally assume 40 to 50% off of a list price. So any owner operators that are listening, if you're going to some contract manufacturer website and you did a price is quoted list, maybe safely assume 40% off of that. But of course, everything gets more detailed and nuanced from there. But I've done a lot of kind of tests and a lot of trying to figure out like, but are we actually still more expensive? And when it comes to a lot of standard products like conference tables, conference chairs, multi-purpose chairs that can go into a training room and then be wheeled over to a huddle space,
Mhm.
we can actually cost less than what you're spending going to a CB2, West Elm. And then you're going to have the consistency of look, the durability of that contract price. But it's really hard to say that when the number you're looking at on your screen is basically double
Mhm.
you're actually going to see on your invoice. So how frustrating, right? So that's a misconception that I
Almost.
a lot. And just this idea that it's not worth it. That's the other thing that I think I come across a lot is, okay, I get it. The chair's going to last a little bit longer, but you don't know my members. They're
Mhm.
rough on everything. Or we don't want to standardize on anything because we had trouble with ABC company a while ago and we were using all their tables and then they discontinued it and I don't want that to happen. And so why would we pay more for something when we're going to have to rebuy it anyways? And to me, the goal would be to start getting the word that contract furniture is going to be consistent, it is going to be durable. And if something happens to it, then that's covered under your warranty and you know to pay for that out of pocket. So that's just what comes to mind immediately is I wish I could. You want to word that in a way that's like, not everything's going to be less expensive contract grade. And I'll be the first to tell people that. If I'm having a conversation with someone, I'll be the first to say, you know what, you're going to be better off getting that piece from a Wayfair or Staples or somewhere else because you're probably going to want to replace it in 3 years anyway. So you'd better but some of those basic pieces that your members are going to interact with day in and day out, they're paying for that. Feel the touch and feel of what they're sitting at when they're in your space. They're paying for that item to hold up, for them to be able to move around their office or get comfortable in that lounge chair and have it not fall apart on them. So that would be a huge thing that I would love to help walk people through, if that's the right way to put it. Just because I know there's got to be so much frustration around that, to be so much frustration coming from operators.
Yeah, I definitely pick up on that frustration whenever I speak to operators when they're starting a new location. It's like the contractor's building the spaces, then I'm more frustration, then fitting out the space. And then it's, okay, how do we fill this? And it's just 3 really big hurdles that they always have to come over when they start a new space, but also refurnishing a space. It's just a nightmare with almost all the operators that I've spoken to.
Oh, yeah. They're up against launching quickly, keeping their costs down, making their spaces look on trend, which can be really nerve-wracking because you're trying to buy these pieces that are going to look good in 8 years if you're going to invest in it, and also save you time. And so if I can add, that's the other thing that I think is maybe a common misconception with contract furniture is that when you go through a dealership, a lot of times people think that's a secondhand way of making the products cost more money. I usually try to tell people it's actually quite the opposite. The dealer exists to save time and money. You know, they'll do the installation, they remove all the trash, they hold the warranty, they do one delivery. So even if you order from me and 10 other manufacturers, it's all going to show up. One truck, one professional install team, all the trash is going to disappear day of. They hold every single warranty. And any day 2 item, you tell them and they handle it for you. It's it's hard to word until we just dive into it, but it's one of those misconception is, but that's a premium upcharge. And it's really, the cost of that is actually built in already in what you've paid for. You'll pay in.
It's really interesting because I've seen a lot of analogies to like the travel agency industry, where oftentimes you're not going to pay more than going direct. But the convenience of having someone book all the connecting flights, all the transportation, make sure that all the visa stuff was done. It's just worth it to have that experience, even though they're making their money from the airlines and all the visa processing fees and all that stuff. So that's probably the case to be made for the dealers in the furniture industry. But what I wanted to ask you about was, is all contract manufacturer furniture more expensive, or are there different tiers like economy, normal, premium, ultra premium? Is there different tiers within contract, or is it all a premium product and then anything budget, you go somewhere else?
That is such a good question. There are absolutely all different tiers. And I usually start there with people, with owner operators that we've had the pleasure of working with. We usually kind of start step 1. How much are you looking to spend on that? And my goal would always be that at the end of the day, you're spending the same or less to go contract grade than you were in a previous solution. So if we'll look at, do you have multiple locations opening? All right, then let's try to bundle that price. Let's try to get maybe multiple locations purchased at one time, get that discount even deeper, be able to get all the product ordered. We can schedule installs, but we can have it housed maybe at that dealer's warehouse or an installer's warehouse. But let's really be strategic about how we order this. I also have learned that a lot of the strategy behind rolling out a new location is to buy maybe 60% of your furniture up front
Mhm.
and saving the rest of that. Okay, if you anticipate having full membership within a year, maybe we look at the cost of ordering all of it up front and then just housing the rest of it somewhere nearby, and just really going through
Mhm.
all of that and starting always with budget.
Yep.
Because there are items and even in our catalog that I wouldn't even show you. If we're going to try to scrape the bottom of the barrel, shoot, I get it. We
Mhm.
all do that in our own personal lives all the time. All right, let's scrape the bottom of the barrel
Yep.
together. Let's look at our least expensive conference line, least expensive chairs, knowing they're going to look great and they're still going to meet those
Yep.
testing requirements. But yeah, I probably wouldn't throw out something at you that only comes in some dreary wood grain that's got a premium on top of a premium price. Like, we're just not.
Mhm.
You could say this is our executive boardroom and it needs to look like fireworks, and let's do it. Like,
Yeah.
let's get marble involved. Which is
Yeah. When you said marble, I was going to go gold, but I think you're right. Marble will be much more premium. Yeah, the reason why I was asking is there's such a big trend now of kind of operators splitting into multi-tier brands. So like the hotel industry did, you got your economy, your motel, your travel lodge inn, and then you got like your top end 5, 6 star hotels. And we're starting to see that as a co-working shift that's happening. So it's really good to know that they can also equip the economy or accessible tier with the same level and standardization that they can at the premium side. So that's really interesting. So before we leave, if I had to ask you, what are the biggest mistakes that you see co-working spaces make when it comes to furniture?
Yeah, I actually think the statement you just made about the tiered brands is the perfect segue into my answer here. I think the biggest mistake that I see brands make is to focus on the speed of the need. So they are up against a timeline, up
Mhm.
against an opening date, and understandably up against filling those seats with memberships immediately. And I think the urgency behind that order often sends owners or operators to check the box as quick as possible,
Mhm.
assuming that the only way to do that is to either go online retail or to go to one of the big box brands that
Mhm.
will have inventory, and to assume that contract can't do that. Where I would probably suggest flipping that almost completely upside down, in that I can't speak on behalf of every manufacturer, but I know that we absolutely inventory parts and pieces of our most popular finishes. So getting a rep involved is always a great first step. But also looking at those multiple locations, discounting ability that a large manufacturer in a contract space has to look
Mhm.
at your full potential, maybe even over a full year, and say, my XYZ co-working brand is going to open 5 locations this year, but it will be from January to December. And some of them will have this furniture and some of them will have this. Yeah, but it's all under one house. And the fact that we see things more in a contract lens rather than a retail
Mhm.
lens is not, it's a very different way of looking at the back end of the order. So we are able to look at that huge stack
Mhm.
and say, this spend looks way different than one spend in January, one spend in February, one independent spend in April. We're able to look at the whole discount on the aggregate, which
Yep.
is where you start to get really aggressive pricing, and still meet lead times that are around 4 weeks. Our standard is 4 to 6 weeks,
Well,
and we have thousands of products within our quick ship catalog that are 12 business days delivered. So
wow.
with enough notice, we could start to populate your office and you could have furniture in 3 weeks from today. And we could still be looking at those discounts. We could still have more, I think, leverage that we have on this side of the fence.
Yep.
Owning our own factories, we own our own trucking company. We have so much more leverage. And that, to me, is a mistake I see made a lot, where people are like, oh, I'll have to call you on the next one. I don't have time on this one because we have to be in 2 months. I'm like, and then having spent enough time on this end of it, of knowing what that looks like, that if you make those corner cuts on some of those pieces, you're probably going to have to replace those heavy use items in a year or less. And that's so much time out of your day, out of your budget, depending on what it is, to replace, to repair. So that would be it to me, is just maybe the assumptions of what contract furniture means, and neglecting to at least open the door. It may not always make sense, but sometimes I think it would. So that would be, to me, that's just the main thing that comes to mind.
I mean, it's definitely something that we've seen, and it's from taking my day job hat on, we see the same thing with technology, right? They buy whatever's the quickest, whatever they can set up, whatever's the quickest onboarding, not thinking about what is the big picture of how does everything come together so that you have a functioning operating stack. So I completely get that. But some of the points you raised bring up two quick questions. One, you said you own your own manufacturing, you own your own logistics. I'm guessing made in the US?
Correct.
Folks who are stressing about the current situation with the borders and that T word will have probably a easier time dealing with a company who's based here if you're in the US. Do you have factories outside to serve the international markets, or is it only manufactured in the US?
So we only manufacture in the US, with one caveat to that. We own, similar to how we acquired Room, a couple years prior to that Room acquisition, we acquired a company called Bryan Ashley, which specializes in luxury hospitality. So they are 4- and 5-star hotels. And the hospitality industry does, when you're talking hotels and spaces like that, tend to rely really heavily on Asian manufacturing for high customization. We do a ton of in-house customization, but it's within our own kind of boundaries. Creating a new chair every single time for every new brand is a lot harder to do with US manufacturing. So our Bryan Ashley brand relies pretty heavily on some Asian manufacturers that we use, but that also is a part of that industry. I think anybody that maybe has spent any time in the hospitality industry knows you're not expecting a 4-week lead time, but you're expecting much longer lead times. And we do have a large, we have our own factories and manufacturing in the US, but we also have a ton of facilities where we try to house metal parts and pieces. And we were very fortunate to have made a huge investment in a lot of those items pre-2025. So we haven't thus far really had to deal with the T word very much yet. It'll come for all of us at some point, maybe it'll get resolved before then. In the meantime, we feel very fortunate to have made a lot of the investments we have. So we ultimately don't have to deal with that very much right now.
Great. So the last thing I wanted to ask you about, is there is this growing trend around the circular economy, right? You use furniture, doesn't land up in a landfill. How does OFS approach this? Is there a way the furniture no longer fits aesthetic? Can I return it? Can I trade it in? What is OFS's kind of positioning around a more circular model of furniture?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Yes, that comes up all the time. We have a massive sustainability mission and effort. And the hard part about furniture in general is that there's really not a lot of ways to do anything with it once it's been used. And so much of it does end up in the landfill. 2 parts to this answer. Quick answer, not really. Once it's been used, it typically, also it's out of our hand. It's owned by the end user at that point. So what they do with it is kind of up to them. We do have partnerships with secondhand companies. Like, a lot of people are familiar with Court. We have a partnership with Court, and they use a lot of OFS pieces over and over again with their clients that are leasing or just kind of loaning furniture.
Yep.
Also have a really great partnership with One Tree Planted, where a lot of our products, including room products, we will plant a tree for every product ordered. And while that's not a direct answer to the furniture itself, it does help to offset a lot of that. We're also working through, part of this, going back to that BIFMA word, that industry acronym, part of their requirements are low VOC, using forestry methods. Anybody that feels really passionately about sustainability, I would say maybe do some Google searching about where your current manufacturers are sourcing their wood or sourcing their metal parts. I think you would be surprised at if it's not being managed, if it's not being standardized by a independent party, then you may not love the answer you get. And so the tree planting on the back end has been a really big one for us. I wish I had the number right off the top of my head for how many trees have been planted over the past couple of years, but it's in the hundreds of thousands, and it's working really hard to do that. And then, of course, we use as many sustainable manufacturing methods as possible and materials as possible. So I wish the answer was that we had solved the what happens when the furniture is dead. We're working on that. But until we've got that solved, doing some other things in the meantime to try to make up for it.
I love that. And I love the fact that there's still more questions left unanswered, which means we're just going to have to get you back on the podcast again.
I love it.
And it seems like we could have had this conversation for another few hours, but I'm going to have to stop it right here so that folks can get back to running their spaces and serving their members. So I appreciate you joining me today and sharing such a unique view into something that we all just write on and sit on, but don't think about per se. But if folks wanted to learn more about your part of the world, what else do you do online? Where can people find you? What's the best links for us to share in the show notes?
Yeah, I love it. Thanks so much, Hector. And thanks for having me on today. It is really quite an honor to be on with you, and I really appreciate it so very much. And if anybody has any questions for me, wants to follow up on any of the crazy things we talked about today, you can find me on LinkedIn, Wesley Edmonds. You can find all of our product information on OFS.com. And then we have a podcast network. After you and I are going to do a few other fun things with that down the road, I believe. But our OFS branded podcast is called Imagine a Place. And I have recently found out that I will be the host of a subset of that Imagine a Place podcast called In the Room. And yours truly will be hosting that, and we'll be having conversations with, the goal really is to get to a lot of end users and start conversations with, we can talk about future work all we want, but it really, every company's different, every organization's different, every vibe is different. And so we want to get to the end users and figure out how they're making it work. So we're having these conversations throughout the year, but the first big event we'll be showing up at is ICFF, the International Contemporary Furniture Fair in New York. And so we'll be dropping some of our first In the Room podcast episodes after that, so you can hear me there too.
Love that. And I can't wait to listen to those. And I cannot wait to see and share all the amazing stuff that we have planned from this cross collaboration. And thanks again for joining us. And thanks to everybody who's listening. Please hit those links in the show notes. Subscribe if this is your first time listening. If you are from the furniture world looking at co-working, we are thisweekendcoworking.com. If you are in the co-working world, you want to learn more about contract furnishing, hit all the links down there and connect with Wesley.
Thanks, Hector.
Take care.